Welcome to a Female Coaching Network webinar called Never Waste a Good Conflict. My name is Carrie Tien. I feel a bit like a radio host, which could be fun or could be annoying depending on how it goes. Um, but I am the huge fan of thinking about and building upon leadership skills. And one of the experiences I've had teaching undergraduates and teaching coaches actually leadership is that our skill of managing conflict or resolving conflict or simply, as I got on this slide, being a leader under pressure is one that most of us need to circle back to and do some recon on, I would say every 6 months. So I can tell if I haven't looked into this work in 6 months because I can see my um, conflict skills slipping. So I'm really excited to share some things with you today. And I guess, if you're consuming this after the fact or if you're live, I know Claire is live and I can't see who else is listening live, and I'm just going to go with that because we are recording. Yes, we are. But I think it's really important to consider the kind of leader you want to be under pressure. And for me, I have many mentors, and one of them always says, um, you need to think about whether you're retaining the relationship in conflict or whether you're damaging it. And in the situations where I've had the strength to pause, so I'm one of those people that has more of a start button than a pause button. But when I do pause, I am reminded that the kind of leader I want to be under pressure is authentic, but also cognizant of the relationship. And I think in conflict, sometimes whether we're an avoider, which I'll get into, or whether we're a shark and we swim right through the middle with teeth bared, we sometimes lose sight of the fact that the relationship is always on the table. And this mentor of mine says, you need to maintain the relationship, and that should be at the forefront of your thoughts as a leader. And I really agree with that. I'm not going to say that that's easy to do all the time. So one of the things I shared in advance of our webinar today was a brief TED Talk by Margaret Heffernan. I really enjoy this one, and the reason I enjoy is that I find it gives women some interesting insight. It gives us a little bit of women's history and how difficult it would have been for Alice to push through not only academic but medical barriers at the time in history she was living. And I loved that really as an academic, well, you need to find that hard problem and solve it. That inspires me. I pretend that I solve too many hard problems, but I'm fascinated with solving the riddle called effective leadership. Um, and because we're not going to have that kind of back and forth, I don't think, unless I see we have Claire Meadows and Claire Mitten. Any reactions from Claire or Vicky or Teresa on if you had a chance to watch that TED Talk and how it made you feel about daring? If you can communicate with me. I thought it was great. Yep. Thank you, Teresa. I've watched it a few times and shared it in some different settings. And for me, the reason I like to start with that to kind of prime our pump is to think about that echo chamber person in our lives versus um, the healthy conflict machine. So Teresa's saying, I like your thoughts about embracing it and framing it as learning. I really do believe, and that's why I said never waste a good conflict. I think that's me kind of echoing something Winston Churchill said. But there is always the opportunity inside of what some of the coaches I've worked with called the sandpaper moments. There's that the sandpaper serves a purpose, and I believe conflict does too. So I wanted to prime us with that. I also really liked that she talked about how a diversity at the table, whether the table is your own thinking or whether the table is you and one person in sport or you and an entire team of athletes, that diversity is something we should view as an opportunity to bring richness rather than an obstacle. And I really loved how Alice saw her statistician as that person who was in the business of disconfirming her thinking. Because to have that kind of confidence, to have someone by your side all the time that you applaud for doing that. I'll admit it's not some kind of confidence I have just yet, but I am working on it. So I wanted to just prime us with that thinking, and then wanting us to, oh, I lost just really think about this idea of pressure. So I do some work for cause. I do a women in leadership workshop on conflict, and one of the things that I've noticed in those workshops, it's a different one than this, but people come in and they rate how much they like conflict or how much they don't, just on a simple whiteboard. It's a really effective exercise, and I would say overall, the women I've worked with in those contexts don't particularly like conflict. And so I tend to go to the side of saying, okay, well, what are the things inside of conflict that can actually help us develop as leaders? So that's what I will focus on largely today. What I'd like you to do is, I asked this in advance, so I don't know if folks had a chance to do it, but to think about, a real world disagreement or difference of opinion that you feel you handle really well. And I hope you have that kind of at the ready for you, because I know that when you are making it about you, this can be quite engaging stuff. This can be an authentic learning experience. So we probably won't, just because of time, describe those, but I hope you have that situation in mind, at top of mind. I definitely have a few. And then I have the reverse too, and we're gonna end up with thinking through the reverse, where there was a conflict where we realized, you know what, I would like to rewrite history and go back in time and do that one again. And I think it's important to be aware of both. So if you have that scenario in mind, great, because what I want to do now is walk us through, and I'm sure everyone's seen this before. It's called the Thomas Kilmann conflict modes. There's an instrument for measuring it. You can get this if you are coaching right now, or you're doing right now for a mentor. You can literally Google conflict quizzes or free conflict quizzes on the internet. Free, free, free. There's lots of them. I would try it before I give it to your people, but you can do these quizzes, basically 20 questions, get an answer that shows where on this scale, and I don't know if you can see my pencil, you end up. And the quiz I didn't do intentionally with you today because I find it can be limiting to where people see themselves in conflict. I'm not a huge fan of labels, although I use them as anybody else in our culture. But the point of the Thomas Tillman that I love is that it shows us there is agility. So it's meant to show us, I believe, that when you move across from uncooperative to cooperative, you have options. And when you move from unassertive up to assertive, you have options. And so I worked this with many, many different people. The last time I talked about this was a group of student athletes, and it was a lot of fun because when we look at this and think about avoiding conflict, probably someone comes to mind because across to accommodating, being accommodating, so super cooperative and willing to go with the flow, kind of not willing to fight for something. Most of us will think of someone, and it may be ourselves. When we go right to the center at compromise, one of the things I want to point out here is that a young man, we'll never forget it. You know those moments when someone says something, and he said, "But Carrie, as we walk, and I'm going to walk you through more specifically these choices you have for your behavior in conflict." He said, "But Carrie, when you look at those puzzles, those pieces on the puzzle, that's the best it'll ever be on a team." And I thought that was a really, really point. He plays on a team and said, if we can simply link the pieces together, we're way further ahead than any other team. So that's one I always keep in mind, because sometimes I describe compromising in a way that I think might sound negative. So I want to be mindful of that today. When we have that super assertive person or choice of behavior, it comes across as competing, and that really is my way or the highway in a conflict. And then over in the far right, so the most cooperative and the most assertive is collaborating, and I'll talk quite a bit about that as we walk through. If you ever want to stop me, I love interruptions, because that means there's a sandpaper moment happening for you. So please, uh, I guess hit me with a message in the chat box down at the bottom there. That would be the way that I will stop. Pause. So walking through, I didn't make these up, but the turtle is a way that I have realized people will remember the term avoiding and what that really, and there's an animal avatar for each of those 5 modalities. So I want to walk through the turtle, and these are all on there. I'll just go through them really, really quick. But the point of this exercise, and this is the most content I'm going to share, is the Thomas Gilman pieces, is to remember that there actually is a time when it's good to avoid. And I know a lot of people look at the labels and conflict and think, oh, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad, and there's only one that's good. And I would say that I want to share with you that there's a time and a place for all of them. And I want you to feel comfortable that you have a pause button and you can hit it and decide what leadership behavior, what conflict modality suits the situation. Because we do have that option, and this is a knowledge is power type situation. So the turtle, it can be good when emotions are really, really high. So you can think of scenarios. I can honestly say I have 2 teenage sons, and I am not a natural turtle at all. You can probably tell that about me already, but I am working on pulling this one out of my toolkit when emotion is so high, particularly with one son, that it isn't appropriate to try and resolve or manage the situation right at that moment. They're really, really good when you need more information. So I can think of countless times. Right now, I'm playing the role of sport director at a large sports facility in Calgary. I'm doing a limited term, part-time. And this needing more information, honestly, everybody, this happens every day. And again, it's not my natural state to be a turtle. I like to lean in, I like to jump in, I like to, what are we doing? Let's do it. And you can see my hands on the screen. I'm trying to keep them out of the screen. It is powerful when you know you need more information. It happened yesterday. I knew that there were 5 or 6 different parties involved in a situation that is very real to all of them. It may not be meaningful to us, but it is to them. And I had one young employee trying to explain it to me, and I said, okay, let's just stop. Let's just buy some time and get more data. And I'm really proud that I was able to do that. Problematic. So a turtle will frustrate people. If you're a chronic turtle, can you put the mic closer to your mouth? Yeah, sure. Sounds a bit muffled. Okay, is that better? Okay. It might be better if I take my headsets right off. If I find the mic, my Mac is actually pretty good. Does it sound better or worse? Awesome now? Okay, yeah. I need to learn that lesson to not wear anything. The Mac is great. Okay, so the problem with this, and I think it comes down to being a chronic avoider, is that it is frustrating and decisions get made by default. And I think this one might be the most dangerous. This is a reputation. Oh, he doesn't like conflict, or she doesn't like conflict, or she avoids conflict. That's not a label that allows you to grow your influence and your ability to do great work and make positive change as a leader. So I think showing agility, and agility doesn't mean inconsistency. It really means that ability to read the needs of the situation and meet them with the right conflict style. So the shark, this is an animal I think we always remember. I still have leadership students from 3 years ago come up to me and say, "Oh, and then she went all shark on me," and that cracks me up completely. That it's turned into kind of a verb, but this is really the compete. And when I work with coaches in NCCP, lots of them are really open about the fact that, yeah, you know what? It's my way or the highway. I'm going to get it. I know what has to happen, and this is why. And so I'm excited to share that, yes, it can be good in an emergency to not um, be ready to buy time and share ideas and open the table and invite diversity. You think about an injured athlete. This isn't time to negotiate conflict. This is act now, act fast, and really good when an unpopular choice was made. So
that could be, I think of scenarios. So I coached for 25 years, and knowing that to get the flight that was cheapest so that we could all go to the training camp, we were going to have to get up at 3 in the morning. I wasn't going to manage or resolve that conflict with my athletes. I was going to make it happen so that we could all go. But this is fascinating and scary to me as a teacher, that when you are a chronic shark or competitor, and so that's being really assertive but not cooperative, people are less likely to learn in your organization. I think that that is a cautionary bullet if there ever was one. We know that that thirst for learning should always be met and sated, and so that's a dangerous thing, because that when someone stops learning, they stop growing, and that, in a sense, they stop being human. You may be surrounded by yes people, so oof, I've got stories about that that I'm not going to share, and because of time. But I think it's a really great question to ask yourself: are you surrounded by yes people? For me, in this admin role I'm doing right now, there are lots of instances where it'd be easier if I was surrounded by the yes, but I have to understand the no, and it behooves me as a leader to ask about the no. And then this one is the one I talked about earlier. A shark can show that they value being right more than they value the relationship. And I can't really think of an instance where that has worked for me. Even when I go back to that simple athlete example, what I explained to the team was I want all of the alternates to have the same training experience that the core team has. And if we don't take these cheap flights, that won't happen. So that was me explaining and valuing the relationships. Okay, I got to go a little faster here. So the teddy bear, this is the accommodator, and this is a really interesting one. So really high on cooperation, really high on maintaining the peace. I don't know if you know, probably can think of lots of folks, and this is such a stereotype, but this is my mom in the family for sure. And it's great when others care more about the solution or the outcome than you do. You can probably think of situations where you're willing to let it go. Where are we going to have dinner as a team? You may be an accommodator on that one, and you may not. It really depends. Shows more respect. I said that already, but erodes respect in the long run. So similar to the last two, if you were that chronic accommodator, there is that reputation growing. Oh, she can't stand on her own 2 feet, or she can't hold her solid ground, and this reputation for not being strong definitely can follow us around when we hold that accommodation or teddy bear space consistently, in spite of the context or what's going on. Two more animals to go. So the fox, and this is one of my favorite ones to describe, because I didn't understand this one very well until a couple of years ago. It's really, really good to compromise and meet in the middle. Remember on the graphic, and I'll show it again, that that's the center of our choices when we don't have time to collaborate, or when collaboration doesn't work. So this might be the more underdeveloped version of what I'm going to call collaboration, what the Thomas Kilmann folks call collaboration. But the issue with it, and this is one that I wasn't aware of until a few years ago, is you never meet all the needs of everyone at the table. So my slides, I'm not unloading them sequentially, but if I did, I would have hid this part and shown you that we're picking jerseys for our field hockey team. I say I want red, you say you want white. The actual compromise is pink. And so that is a graphic representation of how no one's needs were met, but we did meet in the middle. And so this idea of a creative win-win doesn't emerge. And I want to explain it in the context of collaborations really quickly. That was the fox, this is the owl. When you collaborate, it takes way more time, and it takes buy-in and maturity from everyone. I don't use the term maturity and link it to someone's age, but I do link it to their willingness to be at the table, and their willingness to sit on the same side as you, even when they don't agree with you. And that's something I think we can teach at a very young age, but it has to be taught in most cases. So to collaborate means there is this mutual respect that we're willing to put the problem in front of us instead of between us, and talk creatively about it. So that takes a ton of trust. It takes an ability to be in dialogue and act. I'm sure you've all done courses on active listening, and this requires active listening from all parties, and listen really means to be silent, to be ready to have your mind changed. That's what listening is. It also requires that we suspend our judgment, and I'm the first to admit that that's really hard to do, especially when you're in a rush. You want to make a decision. This collaboration will not work when you don't have time. And it also means that you're able to challenge with respect. And that, I think, links beautifully with the TED Talk and with the relationship Alice had with her statistician. That constant ability to challenge came from heart and soul called respect, that they had that relationship. And I think that relationship is it's very rare in my experience. I had this with a few coaches that I swam for. So I was an athlete up until I was 24, and got to that place with a few coaches, and those are some of the most memorable moments of my life. Not the easiest, but the most memorable. So I'm going pretty quick because I want to get to some things that you can do, that you can reflect on. I don't see how many folks are online right now, but that's okay. Um, Attendee list, maybe I'll go to. Oh, I lost my screen. That was a bad. There. But what I'll ask you to do right now is look at this diagram again. We have 4 online. Okay, great. And think about that situation you began with, where you were in conflict and you were very proud of how you handled it, and kind of label it on the graph or on the chart, and about what your actions were. And then push a little further in and think about how did the other person or the other group of people perform in this conflict, because we never want to waste a good conflict. We never want to waste the opportunity to be really brave and appropriate in conflict. But I want to make super, super clear, and I don't have a slide on this, uh, we cannot control any other's behavior in conflict. And so that's where it gets interesting when you talk about like that young basketball player did with me. And he said, Carrie, the best we're ever going to get is linking the pieces together. Perhaps he's right. I don't know. Over here at Collaborating, it's a beautiful place to be. The air is really rare because it will take everyone saying, okay, you said you want a red jersey. I said I want a white jersey. Let's take the time to sit down and talk about what does a jersey really need to do? What are we really representing? Should we think about our core values? Should we think about our mission? Should we think about all the practical parts of, the color of the jersey when we land on the grass and this and that? And taking the time is not something I think everyone's always willing to do in conflict. So I want to just hit pause for a second and get you to go through for yourself. And then if anybody wants to pop up on the message board an aha that they've had or a question that they have about seeing where they were in this conflict they're really proud of, and then identifying or, problem solving a little bit, where were the other parties? And does that give you any insight into what you want to do going forward? Because all of us, when we get off this webinar, we will encounter some kind of conflict today. I truly believe that. I think sometimes it's at a low enough grade that it doesn't even feel like conflict, but it can happen in the grocery lineup. So I'm just going to pause for a second and see if there are any reactions in the chat box, comments, questions. Yeah. So Teresa's saying that the conflicts you're recalling, the best I got was a compromise. And I think because I was running out of time, yeah, and the decision was yours to make. Yeah, that's huge, and especially when you're the leader who has the final say. You know, in this admin role, I'm playing and learning so much. Kind of the opposite of the academic leadership life I've led, and I'm so grateful for that contrast. But what I see is our CEO must make that call, and so his role is different than all of us on the director team because it isn't that we're not making decisions, but that he is accountable to the board. And so every layer, it's like he has to be a generalist who can make those fast decisions. And I feel I'm learning how to facilitate that because he will never have enough time. He will never have the time that I have. I don't know if that makes sense, but uh, we we have conflict every day, and I think that's a really important point that you're making there, Teresa. And I think that's why I'll always remember this young man talking about a basketball team and being those puzzle pieces, and that the victory is in actually fitting them together rather than having them like this. Uh, that I'll always remember, and it's a reminder that we shouldn't judge a situation that doesn't become collaborative. And I always challenge students. I say, look, you're trying to get into med school. You're writing these letters about, you're gonna get asked about situations you collaborated in. And I'll challenge you to understand that you're not truly collaborating unless everyone at the table feels invested and feels part of that process. Hokey as that term is or phrase is, um, it's rare. Yeah, takes tons of time, tons of humility. Any other comments here? Mm-hmm. I'm reading. Can everyone read this? That's from Delaney. This is awesome. Whoop, minimal conflict. Okay, so I'll just, I'm thinking you can all read it. Carrie is cutting in and out on my computer, so I'm having a hard time hearing everything. Huh. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, Delaney, that's full of excellent talk about real world experience. And I'm working with a few people right now who but it's almost I almost feel silly talking about what I'm doing right now and as if it's against their confidentiality, but it's so fascinating to me because the disruptors in our group. So Delaney, to just link to what you're saying, how you all, well, you don't love conflict, and I think that's very normal, very mainstream. Uh, and I don't have any research on that, but I think especially I lots of my women friends don't like it. But this idea to break the silence to promote good thinking and to have the closeness to be able to think together and not agree. So the disruptors in my current, I'm on this director team, and there are two disruptors, is what I'll call them, and they're fabulous, but they're not always in alignment with everyone else, and so it's figuring out how to have conversations with them that invite their opinions and invite their views. And what I'm trying to do, which I haven't said out loud to either one of them, is be kind of a peer mentor on encouraging that, but also keeping the culture of who we are as a leadership team really healthy. And so I think the way to make this start happening, like you're saying, you spoke on the phone yesterday with a colleague, um, and it was the first time you actually questioned yourself somewhat, suggesting you could have been more vocal. That's the beginning of it, right? Because there's a way to have harmony and then to have that really healthy disruption in the harmony. If you think about the most important relationships in your life, the formative relationships, the ones that really, really last, they have both, right? They have that undercurrent of harmony and trust that's built over time through being consistent and having good character. And that's where connection comes from. But I think that earns you the right to challenge some things. And so I just love that you're integrating this with your actual coaching experience. And I would say stay close to this. So if you're interested in making some gains in this area, um, diarize for yourself to come back to this kind of once a month and think about, okay, this is what happened. This is what I saw. These were the options I had. This is the one I used without maybe realizing I could have done X, Y, Z. That's how leaders grow for sure through that kind of structured reflection. Really, really great. Anything else in the I love that came out from Delaney. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Um, so I'm gonna keep moving on. We're at for my time 9:41. My graphic here that I haven't taken from anyone's research, but really from my own experience, is that the way to be a conflict ninja is to understand you have a pause button and you have a start button, and to have control over both and to have agility with both, I think, is part of the pattern of success that I see in people who grow their skills when it comes to managing and resolving conflict. And I do believe too that it really is about balancing your ability to be assertive with your ability to be empathic. So I didn't put cooperative um, because I think cooperative says something different to me. Empathic means, for me, that you are willing to not only listen, but to open up to that other way of seeing the situation. And whether it's as simple as that other jersey or to kind of link to what Delaney's seeing, that other coaching philosophy, that other core value, that empathic part, and that openness. I just imagine it as an opening up of our heart. Uh, is really important to balance with assertiveness, I think, to get all these things right. So what I'm going to talk about now is making a bit of a plan for yourself, um, and 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 this is where I want to kind of circle into. I think I might have it later in my slides, but I'm going to go to it now. Um, Conflicts where you realize, and this will take a little bit of reflection, so we'll pause again, but you realize that you would like to perform differently in that conflict. And I'll give you an example for me, because I have them all the time. Uh, Examples where I underperformed. This happened yesterday, but what we're going to do is we're going to hit pause here, and that's why I have the pause graphic, because certainly for me as a human and as an aspiring leader, uh, I do need to pause and think through something like this in order to follow the pattern. And sometimes people find this pattern hokey. You've probably all been exposed to it before, making I statements. But the beautiful thing about them, and what I'm finding with university students right now, is that people don't take the time to practice them. I had a young woman come and see me at my other job last week, and she said, I worked on those I statements in your leadership class 3 years ago, and I finally had the courage to use them with my dad the other day. So she was disagreeing with her dad about what she was going to do when she graduated, and she said I sat down and I planned out these I statements, Carrie, and I still remember them. And in leadership classes at university, I cover a lot of theory, but it's so interesting to me that this is the part that they take with them, the skill. So I want to work a little bit on this idea of, well, what have I got all over the slide, first of all, and then have you take a second to plan out what you would say. Could you rewrite a conflict that maybe didn't go the way you wanted it to go, knowing what you know from the choices you have, but also just knowing what you know from the outcome that was achieved in that particular conflict. So I'll use an example. And the part about having confidence, humility, and skill, this comes from a book called Crucial Conversations. Probably lots of you have heard of it. And so does the advice on talking tentatively. And sometimes I get challenged on, women shouldn't be tentative, they should be assertive. I mean, I couldn't agree more. But when you begin saying something that may be difficult for the other person to hear, it never serves you to start like a shark. It really doesn't. So for me, I actually have a big booming voice. Uh, so that's why I'm feeling bad about that. But I think it's internet stuff with the voice. But I have to intentionally downgrade my volume and slow down my cadence because I tend to talk too fast, especially when I'm nervous, and I tend to talk too loud, which people can find aggressive. So I like the advice of just think about what talking tentatively looks like for you. It might mean slowing down. It might be increasing your volume. I'm not sure. And the other thing on those two things about confidence, humility, skill, I mean, I could spend the whole day talking about those three things. And the tentative entry is you got to get some feedback on this. So whether that means you film yourself on your uh, we all have one of these, I think now, or you get a friend to film you, or you have a trust colleague that you can rehearse this with, and then they can say, I like this, but this is what you were doing with your arms. I don't know if you want to. Did you know you were looking down? As hokey as this may seem, everyone, if we were live, that's what we'd do. We would walk through this together and give each other tips and come up with a bunch of questions and ideas for each other because that's where real learning happens. This if you choose to do this and play with this, it should make you kind of uncomfortable. Okay, so again, linking to that book, Crucial Conversations, and if you're interested in it, um, I well, I know this is being recorded, but it's not the most wonderfully written book, but there are a few ideas in there that I really like, and those are two of them. So you want to share your facts first, and you want to always start with an I. And the reason you want to start with an I is because in conflict, you can only speak for yourself. The minute you start saying, and I don't know if lots of you, I've been married for 22 years, and I've made too many statements that start with you, and those always bring conflict. Those do not diffuse conflict. So a learning for me is to just be aware of what's the pronoun at the beginning of the sentence. So what we know is that when you start with I, you are really speaking for yourself. You are being assertive because you are stating your truth. And I've had lots of coaches say to me, Carrie, you will say I saw or I heard, but I'll say that's not true. When you start this way, you're not managing the truth. You're speaking from your unique point of view. And when you're in the right frame of mind and you're balancing that humility with confidence, you'll be able to say these three things, and then you'll actually be ready to hear that other party's response. So, and I'm going to work this just as a one-on-one conflict. I know as a coach, lots of the conflict I had to manage was really my whole team, or three athletes and me, and I was going to say kind of versus me, but that sounds negative. But I think we know that emotion, we can't take the emotion out of sports, so emotion tends to come with it. Opportunity for lots of conflict. Anyway, so I see or I heard. So the example I'm going to walk through is yesterday. I had a young person who reports to me. I'm not sure how to say this. Underperform, and so heard that verbally and then got an email that really said that underperformance. So I don't like the way I handled it because I was really low on time yesterday and I just snapped back. I snapped back an email, and I'm a huge, huge advocate in everything I do for get off the computer, stop hiding behind the email, and go face to face. And so that was my first mistake. And out of laziness and annoyance, I just snapped a one-liner back. Brutal. Those one-liners create conflict. There's nothing more easy to misinterpret than an email or a text. So number one, this script needs to be prepared to perform face to face. So what I should have said was, I saw, and I'm writing mine down, and I'm encouraging you after I'm done this to get you a minute to write yours down. But I saw the research you did on the new equipment. right? And that's really it. And stating the facts, because I did see the research. It could have been I heard from my colleague you brought forward a quote. Um, I hope to all of you that both of those statements are fairly neutral, right? It's just I saw the research you did, or I heard from the director who I share an office with that you brought in one quote on this, and that's just stating the facts, and it's certainly my facts, and I don't think those are debatable. And the other thing I want to get to here is that uh, you want to go through these 3 steps uninterrupted. And that can be really hard to do in conflict because even in the scenario I'm walking through right now, I know this great young employee might have jumped in and interrupted me after I said, if I'd done it this way, I saw your research. But you want to you want to stand your sacred ground on this and just be able to walk through them. And so that's why I'm a big believer in planning them. If you know it's going to be a difficult conversation, hitting that pause button, and I know I have the start button on there, but I'm asking you to pause and create the statements before you dive in. Anyway, so I saw your research, and then for me, the feeling one isn't hard at all, and I know it is because I'm not afraid of emotion, mine or anyone else's, and I don't know why that is. I think just experiences and aptitudes, but for some people, this one's the hardest one, right? Say how they feel. So you might have to think about it and spend some time. There's some really interesting mindfulness research on being able to label our emotions and not just label them as that really simple, I'm happy or I'm sad, but label them at a fairly deep level. And I know that's not the topic for today, but I think we could all culturally get good at this, at deciding, well, how do I feel? And so yesterday, when this all went down, I felt annoyed, I felt frustrated, I felt disappointed, I felt pissed off. I wouldn't say all that. And I didn't say it, right? I just sent that snappy conflict creator, which was such a dumb move on my part. But what I would say if I'd hit pause and thought about it is, I saw your research on the project. Um, I feel there's room for growth on that one. I feel we need to stretch it out beyond one company, and I feel it behooves you uh, to build that out because and then I could say a lot more, but really instead of saying I feel frustrated, I don't think she needed to know that necessarily. I think if I'd gone face to face, she would have seen it in my eyes and my body language, even though I would have been trying to stand tall and just stand neutral. Um, that's the I feel statement I should have used. And then I need or wonder. These are my favorites because they invite dialogue and they invite that person. So you want to build it as an open-ended question, right? Because I'm her boss, I guess I could say, I need you to spend some time, stretch it out, find 2 more companies. And I guess that, it's a little bit sharky because it's me telling her what to do. And unfortunately, there are times when a boss does just tell people what to do. But to just build this out a little bit more and make it a more inviting conflict situation where this young woman might feel empowered, I would say something like, I wonder if we can find some time to look at, and then you fill in the blank. For this situation, it would have been to look at what our competitors across the nation are doing, to look at what the top trends are in fitness, fill in the blank. But that, if you only remember one thing from our time together, I'd like it to be that when you start a sentence, I wonder, and I use it all the time when I say, I wonder if we could find the time, you see the other person change. They relax. They think, you do? You wonder if we could find the time? Yeah, I do. Like, I'd love to put some time into this. And because what you're saying is I care, right? I need a little more direct, but I think it still works. Well, I know it works. So, oh wow, I'm on too long. It's 9:55. These slides I know you'll get, but that little simple script about facts, your story, where you're at, where you feel, and then invite that dialogue. Beautiful. Does it mean that the other person will just beautifully knit into what you're asking for? Nope. No, the one thing we don't know is how others will react to us, and the one thing we can do though is control how we are in conflict. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving because of time, and if you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat box. But what I wanted to do is for you to go to the scenario you're not really proud of, that you wish had unfolded differently, like that little example I just gave you from my life yesterday, and work it through and walk it through. And you know, it'd be really neat is if I could go to work tomorrow and do this with this young employee who I do think I'm mentoring in lots of ways. I mean, she's fantastic, and say, okay, I want to try it this way. What's your reaction? And then get her feedback. And I think it would be very powerful. So that's just the same statements I see or I heard, I feel I need, I wonder. Invite their story. And then you have to bear witness to their story. And that's not always an easy part to do. Okay, so one thing I do want to touch on though, before we wrap up, and we'll probably go a little bit past the hour, is talk about unreasonable people or people you know bring a lot of conflict. You know, and I have a story, I have a story about everything, but I have stories about this in sport, and just wondering if anyone can type in the text box rather than rely on my experience again, successes or failures or opportunities you've had when it comes to that chronically unreasonable person that you work with and that tends to bring conflict. I'll just give you a second there. Screen says typing. My default response is to avoid them. I know. There's I'm always worrying about confidentiality because I'm a worrier, but yeah, I have people right now that I avoid. And yesterday I actually said to myself, come on, because I was preparing this and I said, okay, come on, Carrie, you know, that self-talk. I have a constant dialogue going on. Just smile and say hello because this is someone I pass by. This isn't someone I have to work with too much. But it actually felt really good to just make the eye contact and say, hi, how are you? Happy Tuesday. uh, but it's ultimately we have these situations, right? And there's someone I work really closely with in a different, I mean, I do lots of different things, which is super exciting and fun, but with this particular person, I need to communicate with them quite regularly. And so I'm going to talk about the tips with that person in mind, definitely not using names, but, you know, it's the person I find I really clash with pretty frequently. So what do you do? And here's some tips. And these are from reading. Uh, there's a really great website on conflict that I really like. I'll share the link with you too. She's excellent. She's a mediator. Used to be a professor, and with a really difficult person, it's important that you let them empty their tank to a point. And so that might be surprising, but if you want that person to just bottle it up and not share with you how they feel or what they think or what they believe, you're actually going to make it worse. You're going to, that pot will boil over essentially. With the difficult person, and you've all heard this before in active listening, but to restate to show understanding is important. I feel that restating, so you're saying this, for me, that doesn't work very well with a difficult person. So I've had better luck with saying, you know, okay, yeah, okay, I didn't think of it that way. It's so that it's what I am more comfortable, me personally, doing with someone difficult is nodding and saying, okay, as more of that, I hear you. I'm listening. I'm not drifting away from the conversation because you're such a jerk. I just try to use my body language and little terms rather than I feel clunky with someone I don't trust. I hear you saying, but for other people, man, they do that so beautifully. So on that one, make sure you do what you're comfortable with. This is really important, and I've taught this with lots of young women in different contexts. And I coach synchronized swimming, so it's always young women. When someone talks over you, and funny enough, this happened to me yesterday. Um, it's very important that so when you stand your sacred ground, not when you're punching someone and not when you're leaning back like the teddy bear, but when you stand firm and solid, you are allowed to finish your statement. You should be free to complete your sentence and complete your thought. And it's very important, especially if you imagine yourself, for me as a synchronized swimming coach, if I was up at the top of the pool, and this happened to me actually as a young coach, where a dad really came on the attack verbally, and I felt was really bullying me, and I had to stand tall and say, excuse me, I'm not finished my statement. And that was hard to do, as a 25-year-old coach, talking to a dad who rightly so was really upset about his daughter. Um, but it's important because the girls that were around and then the other parents and everybody else who was watching this take place needed to know that I was a strong leader and not willing to be bulldozed and bullied. And so that's an important fine point to remember and I'm very aware of it. When this happened to me yesterday and someone talked right over me, like it's 20 years later and I hope I have more confidence, but it took me right back because it was the same statement. I said, I'm not finished speaking. And that person kept speaking. So I said, I'm not finished speaking. Or I think I might have said, please let me finish speaking, and he kept going, but it was really neat because the other person in the room looked at me like this, and I just felt calm that I needed to say that. I needed to say the right thing. Teresa wrote, sometimes I will project their response, worst case scenarios. Sometimes it's a self-fulfilling. Absolutely. And I have an edge, I like to call it, which is code for I have the ability to bubble over myself. So when someone brings that at me, it takes a lot of mindfulness to stay firm. And I do things like, I visualize my feet getting heavier and heavier. I visualize my spine getting longer and longer if it's a face-to-face confrontation from a really difficult person. Uh, and this piece, keep record. I think that behooves you as a coach to know what has happened when, because really it's sad to say, but you never know when you might need that. And you might need to be able to say, hey, you know what, this person or this administrator said this to me in August, and now we're in November, and it escalated to this. That is really important. This works very well. I've watched a lot of my colleagues do this really well when someone seems unreasonable to you and you're able to stay calm in conflict, to keep asking them for specific things. So with that dad, it's funny, I remember that and it was 20 years ago, but saying things like, help me understand what you need. Help me understand what you're looking for. And I'm really fond of that help me understand because, again, I think it shows empathy and assertiveness at the same time. And it opens the door to that speaker. Even though he was saying things I didn't want to hear, I needed to let him be heard. And then the last one on this is to prepare psychologically. So, um, so these all sound so negative, but someone else that I work with, when I know I need information and interaction, I prepare because I know that their style is very high conflict. It's very black and white and a bit military. And so I prepare and I don't go and have a conversation with this person unless I'm really full of energy and able to do that. Yeah. Now, Teresa says, in the example, I'm not finished speaking. Where he wouldn't stop talking. How do you pick up the discussion again? And what can you say to acknowledge they heard you? Okay, well, that's excellent because in the scenario that happened to me yesterday, I don't think this person heard me and I didn't do it again. because he was really interested in saying what he had to say. And so this, he was facing the other person. I was kind of beside him, and we had both been facing her. And so looked at him and said, "I'm not finished speaking." And he kept going and staring at her, and she kind of looked at me, and I let it go. I went back to my desk and started on something. So, I think in your question, if that was just me and this one person speaking, I would have had eye contact and I would have looked in his eyes and said, "I'm not finished speaking." And I don't necessarily think he would have stopped, but I would have held my ground. Or depending on the content of what he was saying, he wasn't saying something hurtful to me. It was literally a topic he was just passionate about. So it wasn't I wasn't being attacked at all. Neither was anybody on my team. But I think if I had been, I would have physically stood up and moved myself so that I was in his line of sight and waited for him to finish and then said, "I need to pick up on what I was saying." I wouldn't push the bear again and say, "Hey, you were being really rude. Hey, you interrupted me," because those statements would escalate the conflict. And when someone is agitated, it never serves you to escalate their agitation. It limits your influence, actually. Yeah. So I hope that answers it. It's an excellent point. Yeah, absolutely. It's situational. For sure. So another thing that I don't think North Americans in general are super strong at, and I'm gonna kind of whip through this one, so we'll finish in about 2 minutes, is that when you're listening, and that I talked about having an empathy gear earlier, and I believe in that empathy piece more than framing it as cooperative. That's just my bias, but you don't interrupt with advice or interrupt at all, or your opinions. And I find this one the hardest, that you don't judge the speaker. Because I think we bring our bias and our judgment to these. The more hot the conflict and the more repeated that conflict is, you get ruts, and your judgment is, for me, it's a set of glasses that I wear, and I need to literally, I'm going to do it, I need to take them off and not judge the speaker and really hear what they're saying rather than deciding who they are. It's huge. Not going to pretend this part's easy. uh, I'm definitely working on those ones for sure. And then this, I think this is quite beautiful. You've probably read quotes by Mary Parker Follett before. It is possible to conceive conflict as not necessarily a wasteful outbreak, but a normal process where socially valuable differences register for the enrichment of all concerned. So beautifully said. Um, But I do believe that, and I think it's an essential leader skill to be able to manage, to be able to dance on the chart across the Thomas Kilmann, and to be able to decide for yourself what you are going to bring to the conflict or what you are going to stay silent about for the moment. So I'll finish with, and this is very straight from NCCP. I love this part of NCCP courses. What are you going to start doing based on anything that hit you today in this whirlwind tour? What are you going to stop doing? And this is you reflecting, actively reflecting and holding yourself to account. And what are you going to continue doing? Because I probably talked about lots of things that you realize, hey, yeah, I do that. That's strength. What we know is that strength-based leadership work is going to stick better than deficit-based work. And I think that's something that's really important to remember in sport, because often in sport we're staring at the gap. We're always doing a gap analysis. We're always looking for that 1%, and that's really, really great. But as the leader, you need to know what your strengths are and explode them, build them, leverage them. So whatever you saw today that sits well with you, double up on it.